As the search for the next head coach of the Indianapolis Colts enters into its fourth week, are the Colts actually close to finding their next head coach? Boy, we sure hope so. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined here by Drake Wally, my fellow writer and analyst at Horseshoe Huddle. Drake, we're entering, like I said, we're entering week 4 of the coaching search. We're down to the finalists, even though there are still more finalists that we're going to go through tonight. But it seems like there's optimism that we're nearing the end of this coaching search. So how you doing, man? How's life over in Drake's world?
Everything's going really good. It's it's very nice to see that the Colts are putting forth not only their best foot, but they're pulling some incredible candidates now, and they're really not leaving any stone unturned. And some of the second interview requests at first, I know got a little people like not the most excited, kind of like just plain biscuits kind of excited, but now it's a little bit different, a lot of spice on this meal, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, there were as after the conference championship games concluded, the Colts looks like they're going to be interviewing another 4 candidates or another 3 candidates at least after interviewing 4 last week. So we're about to that 7, almost 8 mark that the Colts were talking about as far as finalists. We already got some excited people in the chat. What's up, Chad? It's good to see you, buddy. Stats Matt, the third member of this show. Let's hope this misery ends this week, buddy. I'm right there with you. And then Nathan, I says he wants the Chiefs offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy, or Raheem Morris. So I know there's camps on both sides. Okay. So, and then stats, Matt. My goodness. I was going to get to it here as the show started. Bubba is not going to Carolina. Yes, the Carolina Panthers are not taking Bubba Ventrone. So, hey, the Colts might be able to keep him. Gary, good to see you, buddy. And then look, Rich Wheeler tuning in past midnight from 4,000 miles away here in the UK. Keep up the good work, guys. Rich, you're the real MVP.
Yeah, man. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it.
all the way across the pond there. But hey, if you're like Rich and you're enjoying this show, you're staying up past midnight to watch us, go ahead and why don't you just hit that subscribe button on YouTube and hit that bell so you know when we're going live. Go ahead and like us on Facebook at Horseshoe Huddle. Follow on Twitter at Colts on FN, and then you got everything covered. So we're going to be talking about the other candidates that are set to interview this week, and we're going to answer that question. Are the Colts actually close to finding the next head coach? So Drake, without further ado, let's dive right into it, man. There's 4 new finalists for the Colts head coaching position. We already talked about it last week. We talked about Jeff Saturday. We talked about Ejiro Evero. We talked about Raheem Morris. And then we talked about those were the guy. And then Dan Quinn, who was going to be a finalist and then backed out. So now we got 4 new finalists. One of them was already interviewed on Saturday, and that's the one we're going to start out with. Giants defensive coordinator Wink Martindale was the late addition on Friday as a finalist. Drake, what do you think about Martindale? There's been a lot of noise around his name, just around the league as far as his defensive acumen. But what about him as a head coach?
I like his gritty and just grimy approach. I remember seeing the almost permed fade mullet that he used to have in Baltimore. You talk about a guy who will entertain you at press conferences, and then he will absolutely be the team guy that you want. He'll push you. You can see it in that defense or that defense for the Giants. They may have been cooked in the divisional round, but look, they played a really difficult team. And I'm telling you, though, Wink Martindale, he's got all the traits that you want as a coach. He's got more of like an old school approach. I think he would be a good head coach. I think it's something he's been waiting for. And you give him the right type of team with a really stout defense that runs the ball, maybe doesn't need a rookie quarterback to start, maybe more of a veteran. I think he fits better with a veteran.
Yeah, I do think that would probably be the case. Wink Martindale's a tough guy, old school guy. Consistently his defenses lead the league in blitz percentage, something that the Colts haven't done in years. I don't know if in recent memory they have really done that. But Wink Martindale is always known for those high octane defenses where it's they're sending a lot of guys, you're getting pressure from all different angles, and he's bounced around, and he's definitely made his mark on the NFL. Stats Matt says, I don't know about him as a head coach, but every player who's played for him has loved him as a head coach, and that's a good point. You hear past players talk about Wink Martindale, and there is a genuine love for the guy. Players go out there and they play very hard for Wink Martindale. So I think that's part of the reason, probably what the Colts are attracted to about him, is that change in the culture where Wink Martindale would come in, demand excellence from his guys, and I think players would respond well to him.
Well, and you got to think the players that Stats Matt is referencing. Ray Lewis. All right, you're talking about Ray Lewis. You're talking about Terrell Suggs. You're talking about
Mhm.
Calais Campbell. You're talking about Ed Reed. I know it was in his later years, but you're talking about some serious defensive talent that he got the best talent out of when he coached. So I'm telling you, whoever he takes over for, I think he is going to bring a completely smash mouth, punch you in the face type style, and it's going to be entertaining to watch the defense, whoever he head coaches.
Yeah, and I think this is all part of the Colts casting that wide net, getting a variety of different coaches, different backgrounds, whether it's a defensive scheme that the Colts currently run or something similar, or something completely different like Wink Martindale runs. So it has been interesting to see. And we're already getting comments of guys we're going to talk about in a little bit, from Christian saying he'd like Steichen or Callahan. Steve saying Steichen, Callahan, and Morris. Chad has said that Morris is the front runner for the head coach, and we're going to give our front runners here in a little bit. Wyatt Law also asked, do any of the candidates not named Raheem Morris, are they able to assemble as good of a staff? Well, I think we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So you guys are coming in with some great questions already. Jim Irsay better be hiring Brian Callahan right now. Jerry, you and I would be
There you
very
go.
good friends. Very good friends. Quentin says Morris or Callahan. We're getting a lot of Callahans here. So, but before we dive into those guys, let's dive into a guy that I think a lot of us were surprised, but it's maybe everyone besides you, Drake, because I think he was your wild card, or you had him as one of your predictions for one of the finalists, and that's Green Bay Packers special teams coordinator Rich Bisaccia, the former interim head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders last year. Drake, what does Bisaccia bring to the table for the Colts?
Well, everybody knows him, from obviously for the special teams position with the Packers. But not only is he, without question, the most tenured guy as far as just NFL experience, but I mean, he's taken. My favorite thing about him is he took the 2021 interim position, took the Las Vegas Raiders, all right, to in a pretty difficult situation, and still was able to get them to 7-5 in his 12 games, got them to the playoffs. So it can work with an interim coach. Okay, it really can. I think that he has rightfully earned at this point in his career a head coaching position. And I also think that even though he's like in his early 60s, this is a guy that can definitely adapt to whoever his quarterback is. And I think that he's got a very open mind and probably has some incredible connections.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about how he did as an interim there with the Raiders and took them to the playoffs, I mean, Rich Bisaccia has a better record as the Las Vegas Raiders head coach than Josh McDaniels does. I mean, look how that team regressed under Josh McDaniels, and last year, when after the season, players were openly campaigning for Rich Bisaccia to be named the full-time head coach. Obviously, the Raiders didn't go that direction, and honestly, probably a bad move, really a bad move, because you all know how I feel about Josh McDaniels. I think he's a snake, and I don't think he's a very good head coach. So we'll just kind of leave it at that. Stats Matt says, interesting note. I heard Bisaccia has been a special teams coordinator his whole career, over 20 years. Never anything more or anything less, and that is interesting. I think I've read up on that, doing research on these candidates as well. But I mean, a lot of you look at some head coaches, and John Hartwell is a good example, the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens. Having that special teams background has certainly served him well. Because you get experience with guys from both sides of the ball, know what makes them tick, know what it takes for those guys to be successful. But I think Bisaccia does it in the same way as the players love playing for Wink Martindale. Bisaccia has a different style about him. He is more old school, but he's not maybe as hardcore as Wink Martindale is. But players still absolutely love playing for Bisaccia and would run through a brick wall for him.
Well, and I go back to it. I think that he's earned a head coaching position. I think that he is ready to do it. And the biggest proof is that he was able to do it. All right, at a pretty successful rate. Clearly, I mean, you're talking about, I think it was 17 games at the time. So you're talking about 5 games in, you lose your head coach. You got this guy who's been the special teams coordinator, takes over and finishes 7-5. That is great. So I think that he's definitely earned the spot, and I think he's going to do. I think he's going to do a pretty good job. Honestly, he showed he can do it, and he has more head coaching experience than even Wink Martindale.
Absolutely. And Chad poses a really good question here. Are you surprised Bubba Ventrone hasn't had a second interview talking about special teams coordinators? I think me personally, I had him as a wild card. I didn't necessarily think he might get a second interview this time around, because in reality, Bubba Ventrone is still a very young coach. I do think eventually he will be a head coach of this league, and I think he'll do a damn good job at it as well. But I just don't think that he maybe is quite there yet. And that's not saying anything or taking away from what Bubba Ventrone has done with the Colts, or what he could be as a head coach. I just think he's not quite there yet. Drake, what do you say?
Well, I mean, let's go back to Harbaugh and let's go back to Bisaccia. Both those guys are special teams guys, and both of them are. I mean, one's contending potentially for a head coaching job, and one is a fantastic head coach. So he'll get his opportunity. I'm telling you, he really will. And every single year, I'll say it again, the Colts special teams has improved in efficiency overall, and they should pay him a little bit extra gravy to keep him on the staff. I know he missed in Carolina, but I mean, somebody's going to try to get him, and they really should pay him just a little bit extra, let him continue to get experience. Eventually, though, he's going to be in the same spot that Bisaccia is, only I think he's going to be way younger when he gets that chance.
Yeah, with Frank Reich getting the head coaching position there in Carolina, there was a lot of people thought that he would recruit Bubba Ventrone to be his special teams coordinator. Now, Bubba was not the one that was picked by Frank Reich there. He was kind of one of the holdovers from the early stages of the Josh McDaniel staff that was being put together back in 2018. But Ventrone and Frank Reich grew very close. So I think that's a huge W in a sense for if the Colts want to keep him, which I'm sure Chris Ballard will be pushing for the Colts, and whoever the next head coach is, whether it is Bubba Ventrone or somebody else. If it's not Bubba, I'm sure that Chris Ballard will be campaigning for Ventrone to be kept there in Indianapolis. So let's after those two guys, let's move on to the big names, because I know everybody wants to talk about it. Let's start with the guy that is going to the Super Bowl. Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen. Another great performance out of that Eagles offense yesterday. The 49ers had only given up 30 points twice yesterday this season, and the Eagles put 31 on him. Drake, on Steichen, and do you think he's a legitimate? Do you think the Colts think highly of him?
Well, I mean, when you've worked with Justin Herbert and you were able to unlock Jalen Hurts, and when your own head coach, whom by the way was a fantastic offensive coordinator, turns over to you and says, "Hey, I need you to take over the play calling duties," and then your team 180s into the most positive stratosphere of a direction where you are beating the living crap out of the teams you're playing in the postseason. I mean, good Lord, Miles Sanders had 2 first half touchdowns. All right. No offense
Mm-hmm.
to Eagles fans. Miles Sanders is not a superstar running back. Steichen's ability to get a pocket passer on point and then a running quarterback on point. He is able to take different styles too and get them on the highest level. He understands how to use running back committees. And I know that everyone loves themselves some Jonathan Taylor. Let's get him 25, 30 carries. Now you got Zach Moss. You don't have to do that. Okay. So you've got a serious committee there in Indianapolis. I think he'd be a great fit for any, and I do say it again, any quarterback and any running back committee in Indianapolis is no different.
That's a huge leg up where Steichen has on the rest of the competition is working with so many different styles of because you talked about Herbert and you talked about Jalen Hurts. I'm going to go back at quarterback even further. Shane Steichen worked with Philip Rivers from 2016 through 2019, and we all got the Philip Rivers experience firsthand here in Indy, where Philip Rivers is a statue in the pocket. Well, I think in 4 years with Steichen working with Philip Rivers, Rivers had a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and us knowing Philip Rivers how he can kind of be erratic with those balls and try to force it in there when maybe it's not there. It seemed like he did cut down his interception numbers. He threw for over 17,000 yards with Steichen there. And then you mentioned Justin Herbert. Where Justin Herbert, he's not the scrambler, I would say, but when he needs to move, he can pick up. And they were able to put that offense and tailor it around him as a rookie. And Justin Herbert goes out there with as the offensive coordinator, throws for 31 touchdowns and interceptions. And then Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, when he was drafted in 2020, he comes out and people are wondering. I mean, yeah, he's a second round pick, but there was a lot of question marks around him. People wondering, would he even work out as a starter? Shane Steichen has come in, he's tailored the offense around him, done a lot of RPOs, and he's turned Jalen Hurts. And I'm not saying this is all Shane Steichen. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is a hell of a player who's put in the work himself. But Shane Steichen has helped put Jalen Hurts in the best position to succeed and has helped exemplify his strengths, being able to run in those short yardage situations, being able to be in the RPO game, getting quick passes and quick read. Jalen Hurts. I mean, Jalen Hurts put up 22 touchdowns through the air, another 13 on the ground, and close to 4,300 yards or total yards. So it's been kind of crazy to see Jalen Hurts's ascension, and I think a big part of that is working with a guy like Shane Steichen.
Well, and Steichen has, again, going all the way back to what you mentioned about back when it was San Diego with Philip Rivers. Like, you've got all three types of quarterback that you can literally have. All right. You've got the statue pocket passer. Then you've got kind of the hybrid guy. I mean, I'm not saying, Herbert's like a hybrid guy, but he can, like you said, kind of get out of the pocket when he needs to. But holy cow, his accuracy, his arm, he's fantastic in volume passing. And then you got a guy like Hurts who really does need almost to use his legs to keep defenses, guessing. Because if you forced him to throw 40 passes in a game, it might not go as well as you'd think if you can keep him from running. So bravo to Steichen that he's been able to continuously game in, game out, just make it work. And even when he was hurt and he had Minshew in there, man, they pushed the Cowboys. They pushed really tough teams. So it just seems like it doesn't matter who you put in front of this guy. He's just gonna get the best out of him, and he's gonna be able to do it hypothetically if he's with the Colts with a rookie right out of the gate, first snap.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does not matter who the Colts draft or bring in as a young quarterback. Shane Steichen, and then I wish I had the link, but because there was a couple months ago, there was an article by Albert Breer talking with Shane Steichen about his pass and how he uses every it doesn't matter who the quarterback is, he will tailor their offense to them. And I think in today's NFL, that's what helps. That's what you need to do to be a successful coach. Don't be so stubborn with your style and with your system that you think that it's the system that produces wins, when in all actuality, players that produce the wins. And it's how you tailor your system to your players' strengths to get the most out of them. Successful football teams do. It's what Kyle Shanahan has been doing with his offense. Obviously, it's working in Philadelphia. It's what Andy Reid has been doing with his offense for years now. That's what the successful coaches in this league do. So it's going to be interesting. And then I want to get to this question because I think it's a good one from Wyatt Law. Is there a scenario where more than one of our interviewees could wind up on the staff, associate head coach type of this? Would that be smart? Drake, do you see any of these finalists, or even if they're not finalists, do you see any of these guys that the Colts have been interviewing ending up on the staff just in a different role than, say, the head coach.
That's really interesting. I would say no to to the guys that might get turned down for a second interview. I don't. I think that they're deep enough that they really are gunning for a head coaching position. And keep in mind, there's still four teams. Okay, there's still four teams that need a coach, and so I say for the second interview, guys, no. But for a guy that, and it's one person in particular that just came up in my mind when I saw that question. That's a Giro Evero, and it's because he got turned down by the Broncos. Actively, they said, "Look, we're moving in a different direction for head coach. Appreciate you." He's probably obviously still. I think he's still on contract actually, but I mean that's about the only guy I could see hypothetically. Let's say Raheem Morris gets hired. I can see a Giro Evero with his ties to the Rams maybe joining Raheem Morris's staff as a defensive
Yes.
coordinator.
Yes, I that's what I was going to bring up before you with stats, Matt. Basically took it out of my mouth. Jiro with his ties to Raheem Morris, whoever the Broncos bring in there as the head coach. If Raheem Morris wants to bring Evero over, I could honestly see that. We already kind of talked
awesome
about
too.
it with Bubba Ventrone. We talked about how Bubba could be a guy that is kept because of with Ballard and the next head coach is going to think. But I definitely think it's a possibility. Is it a guarantee? Absolutely not. But it is a possibility. And as the Colts are gleaning more information out of these guys, it's just going to help them determine where they go once a new head coach is in place. So, but let's talk about the final finalists of right now, and it's my guy, Mr. Brian Callahan, Bengals offensive coordinator, which unfortunately the Bengals lost yesterday. But when you look at that offense and see what they've been able to do, and how Brian Callahan has worked with Joe Burrow, he's worked with Derek Carr, he's worked with Matthew Stafford, he's worked with Colts all-time great Peyton Manning, and has a ringing endorsement from him. Drake, Brian Callahan, finals for the Colts head coaching job. What's your opinion on that?
I mean, you're talking about a guy who was working as a coaching assistant in 2010 when he was 26. Okay, like that. I think he's like 37, 38, 39. Him and Steichen are kind of like the same age. But then he goes to offensive quality control and then offensive assistant with the Super Bowl champion Peyton Manning led. I mean, ragarm Peyton Manning led, but nonetheless, Super Bowl champion Broncos. And then he goes to the Lions, quarterback coach, then the Raiders. And so you're talking about a guy who's worked with Peyton Manning, he's worked with Matt Stafford, he's worked with Derek Carr, and now Joe Burrow. He's taken a running back named Samaje Perine, and I've said this over and over again, and it's incredible because before Callahan, you didn't really see I mean, Perine was kind of new to the league, but he's been able to take a seriously badly beaten down offensive line with injuries and still push the Chiefs to the brink. I mean, outside of a late hit, that maybe that game goes to overtime. Maybe the Bengals are going to the Super Bowl. You don't know. I mean, it was very close, but Brian Callahan, man, he's shown he can take kind of like Steichen. He can coach all the quarterbacks. Okay. He can figure out your best strengths. He worked around 3 offensive linemen being hurt in an already kind of underperforming offensive line. Okay. Like that just says it all to me. I think he's got head coach written all over him. And I personally don't think the Colts should let him or Steichen leave the building.
Stats Matt says that Callahan is definitely in his 3, and for me, Callahan's number 1, and there's multiple reasons for that. I think I've mentioned this multiple times. His interview with Tom Pelissero, shedding light on what he does, why he coaches, and it's because he likes seeing the players succeed. He likes players in the position to go out there and win. One of the underrated factors that about Brian Callahan that people might not know is that yes, he does have an NFL head coach as his father, and Bill Callahan. The thing is, he's never worked under his father's staff. He's never worked with or used his father to further himself in his career, and I admirable. You're not getting the nepotism that maybe the Colts current interim head coach has gotten. The guy has worked his way up step by step and earned it every single step of the way. Every single quarterback that Steichen has worked with has glowing reviews about him. I mentioned Manning, Stafford, Carr, Burrow, and each has had great seasons with Callahan on that staff. And then when you think about, yes, he does have a lot of talent on that Cincinnati offense. Yes, he doesn't necessarily call plays, but at the same time, Nick Sirianni never called plays in Indianapolis. Nick Sirianni is now with Philadelphia to a Super Bowl. You don't necessarily. I mean, yes, you can talk about the talent that they have on that offense, but when you look at the offense from bird's eye view and you look at the coach's film of that offense, the way things are schemed up and how they get players so wide open, and how he gets Joe Mixon and Samaje P you talked about in those areas, so that way they can be successful running the ball, making it so Joe Burrow can go through his progressions quickly and get it to the right receiver. Brian Callahan is an absolute stud, and I think that if he's not hired by the Colts are going to be, I mean, that's the Colts are going to regret it, because Brian Callahan can be the person that leads this team and leads their young quarterback into the future.
Well, and you just go back to the line of quarterbacks that he's, actually coached and just been around, and how long he's been doing it, and he's still young. Okay, he has a ridiculous amount of experience. He has 13 years in the NFL. That's crazy for a guy who hasn't even hit 40 yet. Okay, so he's like I said, he's got head coach written all over him, and I think that if you're talking about an offensive mind that not only needs to be on your team as your leader, but would fit perfectly. I mean, look, not a free agent quarterback, not a Kyler Murray veteran. Okay. The Texans are kind of taken, all right, hypothetically, by
Mhm.
D'Amico Ryans. What better fit for Brian Callahan than a rookie quarterback with some stud running backs and an offensive line that I think that if Fries and Raymond are actually studs, you've got it all right there.
And we got Steve here in the comments. He's already saying Callahan with Stroud. I think that home run combination right there. He also says Steichen with Richardson, Stroud, or really anybody. Like we were talking about how Steichen can really tailor his offense to whatever quarterback they have. And then Stats Matt saying how he just found an article today talking about all that Callahan is involved in Cincinnati. And I'm sure that it touched on some things that of the things that I said and probably more. So Brian Callahan isn't just a figure as the offensive for Zach Taylor. He's heavily involved in the game planning, and something Zach Taylor relies on heavily. So, with that being said, we talked about the 4 finalists that left so far. We already talked about the other 3. Which one is the best fit for the Colts, Drake?
Well, when at the time of this, we hadn't put Callahan's name in, but I actually had 3 different fits. I think the worst is Wink Martindale. I think he's the worst fit just because I think he needs a veteran. I think he's way more, you know, inside of a veteran's scope. Staff building is either going to be, I think, Rich Bisaccia or Raheem Morris, and at this point, I have to supersede who I had before. Brian Callahan. Okay, he is the best fit for the Colts. He's the best fit for a rookie quarterback, any rookie quarterback, but especially a guy that has CJ Stroud's traits. I love me some Anthony Richardson, but look, if you're going with the best candidate for this position, it's Brian Callahan, and the best fit for him is CJ Stroud.
Absolutely. And as Stats Matt was saying, that Callahan runs all offensive meetings, so Taylor can do everything else that a head coach has to do. So, I mean, a lot of that offense is on Brian Callahan's shoulders. So, listen, I mean, you guys know that I'm a huge Brian Callahan fan. I think the guys that can build the best staff would probably be, like you said, Raheem Morris. I also think Shane Steichen could probably build a great staff just with the amount of people he's been with. Stats Matt says here Steichen could build a monster staff too, including keeping Gus Bradley if he wanted to. And I would agree. For me, it doesn't seem like Wink Martindale would be the best fit, especially for this Colts defense and what they're good at. But and I mean, outside of Jeff Saturday, because we all know Jeff Saturday is the worst possible option for this team. But I digress. But yeah, I mean, I still think for what this team wants to do moving forward and who has the best potential as a head coach, it's Brian Callahan, hands down. And that's who I'm going to stick with through this whole process. We'll see if the Colts think the same way. Because I mean, the Colts could think, obviously, they're the ones in these interviews, and they could be hearing completely different things. So that's what makes this all interesting. But Drake, I think as Colts, as people that cover the Colts fans especially, I think people are a little bit tired of the search. We just want to know who the next head coach of the Indianapolis Colts is going to be. So I'm going to ask you right here: are the Colts close to finding a head coach? Drake, give me that answer.
I'd say it's going to happen by the end of the week.
Oh, okay.
I really do think by the weekend you're going to have a new head coach. Now, I also argue two reasons as why people are, a little bit more sped up to be sick of this. Number one is that stupid petition that's going around, and number two is just the idea that Jeff Saturday might actually get the head coaching job. I think if he was, if he actually did what he said he was going to do and said, "See you later," you might be talking about more of the fans would be patient, but I really do think it's getting down to the wire. They've announced the second interviews, and some have already had them. So I think it's getting very close, and you might hear about two finalists pretty soon, or maybe even an outright hire by the time Callahan does it. Hopefully by Wednesday.
Yeah, I would say that the earliest we would hear a hire is Friday, because the Colts still have to interview. They still have to interview Callahan. They are flying out to Philly to interview Shane Steichen, because he's prepping for the Super Bowl, and I have to interview Rich Bisaccia, and I'm not sure if that interview happened today or not. I'm not 100% certain on that. But if they're able to say they go out and interview Steichen tomorrow, and they're able to get Callahan in here on Wednesday, do we have a decision by Thursday night? Maybe. That would certainly be great for us, since that's when our next show is going to be.
Perfect timing.
But I think, yeah, exactly. I think best case scenario is the Colts make that decision on Friday. If not, I think it would probably go maybe into next week after the Senior Bowl is done. As StatsMath said, Rich was supposed to be today. Thank you for that, buddy. So yeah, I think if all goes well, and if they are completely blown away, and if they're able to all get on the same page, Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay and Carly Irsay, I think that maybe we could have a decision on Friday. If not, then it could be a surprise weekend hire, or something happens at the beginning of next week. Either way, I think it's within the week. I don't think it's going to go past the Super Bowl. I don't even think it's going to go that deep into Super Bowl week. Everything that I'm hearing and everything that is being put together, I would say it's either going to be Friday, or it's going to be very, very early next week that we know who the next head coach of the Indianapolis Colts is going to be. And I think we would all welcome that sooner rather than later here. That's for sure. But
Absolutely.
Before we get out of here, we got one more thing to touch on, and it's the star running back. Jonathan Taylor underwent surgery this weekend on that right ankle that has been plaguing him. That plagued him all season long, and honestly has been kind of bothering him in a couple past seasons. And I want to get out in front of this right away. This is not a Shaquille Leonard situation. I saw a lot of people saying that, oh, well, we heard this before. We've gone through this before. This is not a Shaquille Leonard situation. Shaq Leonard's ankle issues was a nerve issue, and it was something that was in his back, causing it to not fire correctly down to his leg. This is nothing like that. This a scope was done on Jonathan Taylor's ankle to clean out some stuff in that ankle that was causing some inflammation, causing some pain, and that just wasn't that rehab wasn't fully getting that pain to go away. So from what I've heard and what Jonathan Taylor has said, it doesn't seem like it was a big invasive surgery. So Drake, are you concerned about this? And do you think that this should be a cause for concern for all Colts fans?
I mean, any injury to your star is going to be cause for concern. But if Jonathan Taylor is not concerned about it, and honestly, the fact that it was kind of a cleanup surgery, it's like you're preventing. Really, I mean, it bothered him a lot, but you got the pain out of the way. It might take some time to heal, obviously, but at the end of the day, it's maintenance. It's not like anything was drastically destroyed. So I think that it was more of at the end of the season. Look, that I mean, we all know the Colts stunk. They stunk like straight up dump trash stunk. So like they were just like, let's shut him down. Let's shut him down. They were just like anybody that gets hurt, we're shutting him down. Throw in the rookies, throw in the backups. They kind of just packed it up at like week 12. So I don't think that's cause for concern. And again, you have Zach Moss. I absolutely will go on and on about Zach Moss. I think that he is going to be a great piece to help Taylor, still get 15, 20, 25 carries a game, but will also help with the wear and tear, take some of it himself. So.
Right. And Stats Matt makes a really good point here. Cleanup surgeries are common in the NFL. Yes, they are. It wasn't a major invasive surgery. It's not like they had to completely reconstruct his ankle. It's not like they're dealing with a nerve issue like Shaq Leonard has been dealing with. This was just to go in, clean it up, and make it so he wasn't going to be running in pain anymore. So he said the top concern is just getting back on his feet. Would I expect Jonathan Taylor to participate in OTAs in the spring workouts? Probably not. But when you're talking about down the road in July and getting into training camp, I'd be shocked at this point. From everything that I've heard, I'd be shocked if Jonathan Taylor wasn't ready to go by training camp. So again, it's the Indianapolis Colts we're talking about. Nothing will ever surprise me anymore. But if I had to put money on it right now, as of January 30th, Jonathan Taylor will be a-okay and ready to go for training camp. So that's our show for tonight. Appreciate everybody coming on and joining us. Again, you guys in the chat were just absolutely killing it. Stats Matt, Wyatt Law, Chad, Nathan, Steve. I could go on and on and on. We'll talk about Quentin. All of you guys were just absolutely the best. And Rich, shout out to Rich, our UK fan, our official UK fan, Rich Wheeler out there. Love to have you on. And again, if you haven't already, it really does mean a lot to us. If you go ahead and follow us on all the things, go ahead and like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Go ahead and follow at Colts on FN on Twitter. And most importantly, subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know whenever Drake and I are going live, because, hey, like we said, probably within the next week, the Colts are going to hire their next head coach. And whenever they do, we will be going live that night to give our gut reaction and to break everything down. So you do not want to miss that. But until then, Drake, I know you've been writing away like crazy on Horseshoe Huddle. What stories do you got out on the site right now?
Well, the most recent story I did is, does it make the path to the head coach a little clearer now that the Broncos told both Raheem Morris and Ejiro Evero, hey, we're going in a different direction, respectfully. That could change things, and you might see some hires in that direction. Who knows?
Great story, by the way. Drake's been killing the game with this stories. Myself, I put an article about Shane Steichen and how he's really been impressing the Colts, not only behind closed doors, but what he is doing on the field. So definitely go check that out. And we're going to have plenty of other stories coming up throughout the week. Go ahead and give Drake a follow right there at D Walster Drake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we'll be back on Thursday night to give you all the latest updates on the head coaching situation for the Colts. We're going to talk some Senior Bowl on Thursday. We're going to go through what's happening in the Senior Bowl practices and really dive into who is standing out. So you won't want to miss that. But until then, Colts Nation, have a good one, and we'll see you soon.